I knew things were going south when I walked into the server room Monday morning and heard nothing but silence. That room had been my second home for 12 years. It was the place where I kept the financial heartbeat of Apex Building Materials pumping day in and day out. Normally, there was a steady, reassuring hum of cooling fans and server racks keeping the database online. But today, there was only the quiet drip of a condensation pipe in the corner. Without that hum, 12,000 construction workers across Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado do not get their paychecks. And when construction workers do not get paid, they do not just file complaints with human resources. They park their heavy equipment, turn off the engines, and walk off the job site. I am Gerald Cooper, 55 years old, and I have been the senior database administrator here since this company was half its current size. I run the payroll back end for everything from concrete pourers in Houston to crane operators in Phoenix. It is not glamorous work, but it is honest, and I am damn good at it. Let me tell you something about construction payroll. It is not like running numbers for some corporate office where everyone sits in air-conditioned cubicles and types on ergonomic keyboards. These guys work in the extreme heat, in the freezing cold, on weekends, and through federal holidays. They climb 20 stories up on steel beams and pour concrete in 110-degree weather. They work overtime when a storm hits and people need their power restored. They deserve every single penny they earn, and they deserve to get it on time. The system I maintain is not some sleek cloud-based wonder that looks pretty in sales brochures. It is a complex beast built on legacy SQL databases, custom scripts, and 12 years of patches that I have applied with the precision of a master mechanic working on a vintage motorcycle. I know every workaround, every quirk, and every potential failure point in that code. I spent years tuning the database indexes, optimizing the query execution plans, and writing customized validation routines to make sure the data import from our various regional hubs never failed. When the prevailing wage laws changed in Arizona last year, I rewrote the calculation engine in 3 days. When the regulatory requirements were updated, I built the compliance module from scratch while drinking black coffee at 2 in the morning. You want to know how complex this stuff gets? Try calculating overtime for a crew that starts work in Texas on Monday, moves to a job site in New Mexico on Wednesday, then finishes the week in Colorado. Each state has different labor laws, different tax rates, and different union rules. Then factor in equipment rental time, hazard pay for working near high-voltage lines, and federal prevailing wages for government contracts. One small error in a single line of code can throw off the entire run. To clear my head after these intense payroll cycles, I usually take my Harley-Davidson out on the highway, letting the wind wash away the stress of the SQL logs. I ride for hours under the vast western sky, feeling the rumble of the engine beneath me. It is the only time I am not thinking about data structures, security keys, or corporate spreadsheets. But corporate does not see it that way. They see an old system that they think needs modernizing, and they see me as the expensive guy standing in the way of progress. That is where Peter Vance comes in. Peter is the VP of Operations, and more importantly, he is the chairman's son. 3 months ago, our company was acquired by Vance Family Holdings, a construction conglomerate that owns everything from cement plants to equipment rental chains. Vance Family Holdings was known for buying up smaller, successful local businesses, stripping away their core support staff, and squeezing every ounce of profit before moving on to their next corporate target. Peter came in with a corporate mandate to streamline operations and eliminate redundancies. In real-world terms, that means firing experienced people and replacing them with cheaper, automated solutions. I had met Peter a few times. He is one of those guys who wears a pristine suit to muddy construction sites and stays inside his air-conditioned truck while the real workers sweat. He got his MBA from some prestigious business school and thinks every business problem can be solved with a PowerPoint presentation and buzzwords like digital transformation. The meeting happened on a Tuesday. I had just finished running a series of validation checks on the previous week's tax data when the phone on my desk rang. It was Sarah Jenkins from HR, asking me to come up to the executive suite. I knew what that meant. Sarah has been here almost as long as I have, but she has always been more worried about protecting the company than protecting the employees. She had that nervous energy of someone who knows bad news is coming, but has to deliver it with a corporate smile. I closed my terminal window, grabbed my notebook, and took the elevator up to the fourth floor, prepared for whatever corporate nonsense they were about to throw my way. I walked down the carpeted hallway, feeling the eyes of the administrative staff on me. As I approached the heavy glass doors of the executive suite, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the corporate storm I knew was waiting behind those doors. Peter's office looked like a magazine spread. A glass desk, leather chairs, and a view of the equipment yard that he probably never actually looked at. He was tapping on his tablet when I walked in, making me wait while he finished whatever task required his immediate attention. "Gerald," Peter said, not bothering to look up from his screen. "We are restructuring the IT department, moving to a more agile, cost-effective model." I sat down in the leather chair. "What does that mean for payroll operations?" I asked. "That is where it gets exciting," Peter said, finally looking at me and flashing a practiced smile. "I want you to meet my niece, Rachel Vance. She just finished her MBA, and she has built an incredible model that is going to revolutionize how we handle payroll." Rachel walked in like she owned the place, which technically, through family connections, she kind of did. She was 25, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than most of our workers make in a month, and carrying a tablet like it was the holy grail of business solutions. "Hi, Gerald," she said, extending a hand. "I have been reviewing your processes. Very thorough, but also very manual. I think we can do better." The way she said manual made it sound like I was still using an abacus and stone tablets. "Better how?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew where this was heading. Rachel set her tablet on the desk and started swiping. "I have built a comprehensive payroll solution in Excel. It is cloud-based, intuitive, and it can handle all the calculations you are currently doing with those old SQL databases." I stared at her. "Excel? You want to run payroll for 12,000 construction workers with a spreadsheet?" "Not just any spreadsheet," Rachel said. "This has pivot tables, conditional formatting, and automated macros. It is like having a database, but user-friendly." I looked at Peter, hoping to see some sign that he understood how insane this was. "Is this a joke?" I asked. "It is innovation, Gerald," Peter said, leaning back. "Rachel's model can reduce processing time by 60% and cut our IT overhead significantly." There it was. Cut our IT overhead. What they meant was they could fire me and pay Rachel a fraction of my salary. I had seen this movie before. A young MBA promises the world with some half-baked solution, the older employee gets shown the door, and then they wonder why everything falls apart. "The payroll run is Friday," I said, keeping my voice level. "Today is Tuesday. If you are planning to switch systems, you need to understand what you are dealing with. This is not just adding up hours and multiplying them by hourly rates." I started counting off on my fingers. "We have prevailing wage calculations for government contracts under the Davis-Bacon Act, which is codified at 40 U.S.C., Section 3142. We have union versus non-union differentials that change based on the type of project and how many consecutive days a crew has worked. We have equipment rental tracking that has to be cross-referenced with GPS data. We have multi-state tax withholdings where a worker can start the week in Texas and finish it in Colorado." Rachel was nodding along, but I could see her eyes glazing over. She thought she understood because she had read about payroll in some textbook. "I have accounted for all of that," she interrupted. "My model includes lookup tables for all state regulations and automated tax calculations." Lookup tables, I thought. The Arizona Prevailing Wage Database alone has 847 different job classifications with different rates depending on which county you are working in. The union contracts have overtime rules that would make a tax lawyer's head spin. You have guys who get time and a half after 8 hours, double time after 12, but only if they are working on certain types of projects. Then you have hazard pay that kicks in if they are working within 500 feet of high-voltage lines, and the rate changes based on the voltage. "Rachel," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice, "have you ever calculated prevailing wages for a federal highway project?" "I have studied the regulations," she said defensively. "Studying and doing are two different things," I replied. Do you know what happens when you get prevailing wages wrong on a federal contract? The Department of Labor comes in and audits everything. They can fine the company for every hour that was calculated incorrectly going back 3 years. Under the Davis-Bacon Act, they can even cancel our contracts and debar us from bidding on future federal projects for 3 years. Peter waved his hand dismissively. We will have compliance reviews. Rachel's model includes error checking. Gerald, Sarah from HR finally spoke up. We will need you to provide Rachel with all the necessary passwords and documentation for a smooth transition. Then we will need you to document everything before you go, Peter said. And that is when I knew for sure they had already made their decision. They were not asking for my input. They were giving me my walking papers and expecting me to train my replacement. When is my last day? I asked. Friday, Peter said, after the payroll run. We want to make sure there is a smooth transition. I stood up, my knees popping. All right then, I guess we will see how it goes. That is the spirit, Peter said, already looking back at his tablet. Sarah will have your severance paperwork ready by the end of the day. The next 2 days were like watching a slow-motion train wreck. I spent Wednesday and Thursday doing exactly what they asked, creating basic user guides and writing down step-by-step instructions. But you cannot document 12 years of institutional knowledge in a couple of days. Rachel shadowed me, taking notes on her tablet and asking questions that showed she was completely out of her depth. Why do you manually verify the Arizona wage classifications? She asked Wednesday morning. Because the state database has a sync issue, I explained. It shows the right wage rates, but about 3% of the job classifications return the wrong county codes. If you do not catch it, guys working in Phoenix get paid Tucson rates, which is about $4 an hour difference. Can we not just fix the database? She asked. It is a state-owned system, Rachel. We do not control it. We just have to work around it. She made a note on her screen, and I could see her typing. Fix state database issue, as if she could resolve a state government system error with a simple email. Thursday afternoon, Rachel was feeling confident enough to start importing real data into her Excel model. I watched her upload the raw time files from our 47 different job sites across 4 states. The spreadsheet immediately started lagging. It is just loading, she said, clicking refresh repeatedly while Excel churned through 12 Zerozine employee records. But I could see what was happening. Her lookup formulas were hitting circular references because she did not understand how prevailing wage calculations cascade. When you have federal, state, and local wage requirements that can all apply to the same job, you cannot just use a simple lookup formula. You need conditional logic that checks multiple criteria in a specific order. Rachel, I said carefully, you might want to test that on a smaller data set first. It will be fine, she replied. But I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice as Excel's memory usage spiked and the program started freezing. Friday morning came, and it was time for the official handoff. I showed up early, packed my personal items, and got ready to leave. I gathered my coffee mug that said World's Okayest Database Administrator, the framed photo of my Harley Davidson, and a bottle of good bourbon. I kept in my desk drawer for emergencies. Something told me they would be needing the bourbon more than I would. The bank cutoff for direct deposits is noon, I reminded Rachel as she set up at my workstation. After that, the bank will not process the files, and people do not get paid until Monday. I know, she said, already focused on her screen where Excel was grinding through the payroll data like a wood chipper trying to process a telephone pole. I started to leave, then stopped. Rachel, one more thing. When this goes sideways, and it will go sideways, do not try to fix it by running the calculations again on the active database. Each time you reprocess without clearing the temp tables, you create duplicate entries in the system. Fix the underlying database mismatch first, then rerun the script. She was not really listening. She was staring at her screen where the spreadsheet was showing green error triangles in about half the cells. Sarah walked me to the security desk where Gary Davis was waiting. Gary is a good guy, a retired Marine who understands the value of knowing your job inside and out. Sorry to see you go, Gerald, Gary said as I signed the severance documents. This does not feel right. It is just corporate business, Gary. Bad business, but business nonetheless, I replied. I walked out to my truck, threw my box in the back, and drove home. I rolled the windows down, turned on the radio, and tried to enjoy the feeling of freedom. But I could not shake the feeling that a major storm was brewing. My phone started buzzing around 10:30 a.m. It was a text from Brian Fletcher, one of the junior payroll clerks who had worked under me. Gerald, Rachel's spreadsheet is showing weird numbers. My overtime calculation says I worked negative 14 hours last week. How is that even possible? Before I could reply, another text came in from Sean Murphy, a diesel mechanic in the Phoenix office. Gerald, according to my online pay stub, my net pay for this week is $45,000. I mean, I work hard, but I do not think I made that much. By 11 a.m., my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Workers from all over our territory were logging into the employee portal, and nothing made sense. Employee ID numbers were getting mixed up with Social Security numbers. Job classifications were scrambled. Crane operators were showing up as office clerks. Concrete finishers were listed as executives. The funniest text came from Hector Ortiz, a foreman on the highway project in El Paso. Gerald, my pay stub says I worked 2,847 hours last week, and my net pay is negative $18,000 because of an equipment recovery fee. Did I buy a bulldozer or did the company rob me? I could picture exactly what had happened during the data import. Rachel had mixed up the column headers. Employee ID numbers were being used as hours worked, and hours worked were being treated as hourly pay rates. Excel was trying to calculate wages using Social Security numbers as multipliers. It was a complete disaster, but the real catastrophe was still to come when the bank tried to process the electronic deposits. At 11:45 a.m., my phone rang. It was Sarah Jenkins from HR. Gerald, her voice was tight with panic. We need to talk. Rachel's payroll file is showing some irregularities. Irregularities, I thought. Under her calculations, we owe the federal government $2,800,000 in tax withholdings this week, but we only collected $210, zero zone from employee paychecks. That is a massive deficit of $2,590,000. I pulled into my driveway, sat in my truck, and listened to Sarah explain how Rachel's Excel model had managed to create what was essentially a mathematical black hole. Also, Sarah continued, the bank is questioning why we are trying to direct deposit $45,000 to one mechanic in Phoenix, while simultaneously deducting $18,000 from a foreman's pay in El Paso. Has anyone told Peter yet? I asked. He is in meetings, and Rachel said she could fix it. Famous last words. I told Sarah she might want to cancel those meetings. By 2 p.m., the bank had officially rejected the entire payroll file. According to their automated security response, the transfer file contained invalid routing codes, astronomical amounts, and corrupted formatting. The employee portal had crashed under the weight of 12,000 workers trying to figure out why their pay stubs looked like they had been written by a broken calculator. Some guys had negative salaries, meaning they technically owed the company money, while others had fortunes. The payroll clerks were running around the office in a state of absolute panic, telephones ringing off the hook as regional managers demanded explanations for the system errors. Sarah Jenkins was sweating through her blouse, trying to draft a memo to the board of directors, while Peter Vance was unreachable in his executive planning meeting. But the real trouble started when the union got involved. Big Roy Henderson has been representing construction workers in the region for 25 years. He is built like a brick wall, talks like a freight train, and has zero patience for corporate incompetence. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, specifically 29 U.S.C. Section 206 and Section 207, employees must be paid their agreed wages on the designated payday. Under Arizona Revised Statute Section 23(3) Fib 1, employers are required to pay wages on regular paydays. If they fail to do so, Arizona Revised Statute Section 23(3) allows employees to recover treble damages, which means triple the unpaid wages. When his guys did not get paid by noon, Roy did not send polite emails. He shut things down. By 3 p.m., Roy was standing on the back of a flatbed truck outside our main office with a megaphone, and a line of utility trucks was blocking the gate. Apex Building Materials thinks they can play games with working people's paychecks. His voice boomed across the yard. If they cannot figure out how to pay us, then we stop working for them. The Wildcat strike spread like wildfire. The Phoenix sites shut down first, then Albuquerque, then the massive federal highway project outside Denver. By 4 p.m., every Apex job site in 4 states had gone completely silent. 12,000 workers were sitting in their trucks, posting photos of their scrambled pay stubs on social media and calling local news stations. The footage on the evening news showed miles of idle highway construction and interviews with angry workers. The local reporters were highlighting the chaos, pointing out that a major regional infrastructure supplier was completely paralyzed due to a payroll system failure. My phone kept buzzing with updates from Gary Davis, the security guard, who was watching it all from the front desk. Rachel has locked herself in the conference room. Gary texted. She has been crying for the past hour, trying to fix her spreadsheet, but every time she changes a formula, it breaks something else. 10 minutes later, another text arrived. Peter is screaming at IT. Apparently, Rachel deleted the original raw time files when she tried to reload the spreadsheet. I shook my head. Of course she did. In her panic, she had erased the only copy of the raw payroll data, since I was the only one who knew the specific command line parameters to extract and parse the raw time clock database files from the backup servers. They were completely locked out of their own operations. I sat on my porch, watching the sunset and listening to the evening news reports about the multi-state construction shutdown. Local anchor representatives were explaining how Apex Building Materials, a major infrastructure contractor, had failed to pay its entire workforce on time, leading to a sudden halt on the interstate highway expansion. They interviewed several workers who stated they could not pay their rent or buy groceries because of the payroll error. The union was already demanding immediate compensation for the lost hours and a full audit of the company's financial operations. I took a small sip of my tea, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Peter Vance and his MBA niece had wanted digital transformation and operational efficiency. Now, they were getting a real-world lesson in what happens when you replace solid database engineering with a fragile spreadsheet. Tuesday morning, I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee and reading the local news articles about the ongoing payroll crisis when my phone rang. The screen showed Peter Vance's name. I let it ring 3 times before I finally answered. "Gerald," Peter said, his voice sounding like he had been chewing gravel. "We need to talk." "Morning, Peter," I said. "Saw you on the news last night. Nice interview. I especially liked the part where you said the problems were caused by a routine system upgrade." "Cut the crap, Gerald." The State Labor Board is opening investigations in 4 states. The union is filing a class action lawsuit for treble damages under Arizona Revised Statutes Section 23-355, which could cost us over $15,000 in penalties. The federal government is threatening to terminate our highway contracts under the Davis-Bacon Act. The bank froze our operating accounts because the payroll file triggered their fraud detection. Our business is in a complete chokehold, Gerald. If we do not resolve this database crisis within the next 24 hours, the bank will freeze all credit facilities, and we will be forced to declare corporate insolvency. I need you to come back. Name your price. I had been waiting for this call. "Here are my terms, Peter," I said calmly. "I want a $25,000 cash signing bonus up front. I want a new contract as an independent consultant at double my old salary, which means $260. Zuzuron a year instead of my old $130,000. I want a written public apology from you and Rachel posted on the company website, admitting that the payroll problems were caused by the premature implementation of an inadequate spreadsheet system. And finally, I report directly to the CIO, not to operations. I am done dealing with people who think Excel is enterprise database software. If you do not agree to these terms, you can explain to your board of directors why the company is facing $15,000 in union damages and losing its federal contracts. You thought you could run a multi-state infrastructure firm with textbook formulas and family connections, Peter. But reality does not care about your business degree. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Peter breathing heavily, his pride battling with his desperation. "Fine," he finally said. "Whatever you need. Just get down here and fix this." I drove to the office Wednesday morning. The parking lot was still filled with union guys camped out, but they waved and cheered when they saw my truck pull in. Big Roy Henderson walked over as I got out of the cab. "Gerald, tell me you were here to save our paychecks," he said. "Working on it, Roy. You guys should see your money by tomorrow morning," I replied. "What about back pay for the strike days?" he asked. "Every penny, with overtime for the guys who were scheduled, I promised." I walked into the building and went straight to the server room. The hum of the cooling fans felt like coming home. I fired up my workstation and started digging through the wreckage Rachel had left behind. It was worse than I expected. She had not just corrupted the database. She had managed to lock the SQL tables, create circular references in the tax modules, and somehow convince the system that we employed 847,000 people named error. It took me 18 hours of continuous work, but I rebuilt the entire database from the archived transaction logs. I used the secure backups that Rachel did not even know existed because they were stored on an off-site physical server. I manually checked each table, re-imported the hourly punch data from the raw network logs, and ran verification checks on all 847 Arizona prevailing wage classifications. By Thursday morning at 6 a.m., I had a clean, verified payroll file ready. I hit the transmit button, and the electronic transfer went through without a single warning. The 12,000 workers woke up to find their correct paychecks in their accounts, including the promised back pay for the strike. Friday morning, I walked into Peter's office. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a week. "It is done," I said. "Everyone has been paid correctly." "Thank you," he muttered, not looking me in the eye. "Where is Rachel?" I asked. "Reassigned to marketing research," he said quietly. "Turns out family connections only go so far when you cost the company millions in union penalties and nearly lose a federal highway contract." "And my new office?" Peter gestured toward the large corner office down the hall. "All yours." I walked into my new office, set my Harley photo on the desk, and sat down in the leather chair. Through the window, I could see the equipment yard coming back to life. Cranes were moving, and concrete trucks were rolling out. I pulled the bottle of good bourbon from my bag, poured a shot into my coffee mug, and raised it toward the window. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Experience always trumps a fancy degree. And when corporate tries to fix what is not broken, they learn the hard way that running a business requires more than just a spreadsheet. I took a sip of the warm bourbon, watching the dust settle in the yard below. It was a good day to keep the machine running, knowing that working men would get exactly what they had earned.